Hey, what's going on? So, I'm a member of a lot of the sublimation groups on Facebook, and I would always come across the question, can I use the WF-2860 for sublimation? So, I thought I would get one and show you how to set it up for sublimation printing. Now, the WF-2860 does not have auto reset chips for its cartridges, so in order to use it for sublimation, you're going to have to install a chipless firmware. So in this video, I'm going to be going over setting up the printer, installing the chipless firmware, and doing a sublimation license plate. Now I was able to find a couple of these printers pretty cheap on the Epson clearance website. If you don't have the Epson clearance website bookmarked, you should go ahead and do that. You can find some good deals on factory refurbished printers. So after I got them unboxed, we're just going to go ahead and set the printers up like you normally would. We're going to go ahead and press the power button and turn the printer on. We're going to set up the language, country and region. We'll set the date, and we'll set the time. At this point, it's going to ask for the cartridges that came with the printer. We'll go ahead and insert those, and we'll select install down here to start the ink charging process. And while it's going through that, we'll go ahead and get the refill cartridges ready. So these are the refill cartridges for the 2860. They're the short 702 or the 202 style cartridges. They don't have any chips on them because the printers that we use these for all use chipless firmware. So when you take a look at them, they're both going to be plugged. We're going to remove this clear plug. This will be the only time that we ever touch this clear plug. We don't really need it at all. So we're going to take this plug and we're going to discard it. It's only used for shipping, but you never want to use the printer with both of these holes plugged. So that's the fill hole. This is the vent hole. And we're going to go ahead and fill this with ink. So we'll go ahead and get a full syringe in there. That's 10 milliliters worth of ink in there. So once we got that filled, I'm going to keep this vent hole plugged with the yellow plug. Also, we haven't used these yet. These are brand new. So this little film on the bottom isn't punctured at all. So now we have it filled, but we still need to prime it. So this little center chamber here needs to be at least halfway full of ink before we put it in the printer. And that gets the air out of the cartridge and gets the cartridge ready to start printing with ink in the cartridge. So we'll go ahead and remove the needle from the syringe, and we'll take the syringe, put it in this center hole or the fill hole. And once we get it in there, you don't have to put a whole bunch of force down in there. Once you get the tip in there, it's pretty good. So once you do that, we'll go ahead and pull straight up on the plunger of the syringe. And once I release it, what's going to happen is this chamber here is going to fill with ink. Now it's got a lot of pressure up on it right now on this plunger, so it's going to fall on its own. Let's see if I can get it not to glare out on you. And once I let it go, it filled that chamber with ink. And now you're pretty much primed and ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and do it one more time. And then what you do is you can remove that plunger. And then we're going to continue filling it with ink. So we're going to replace this needle onto the syringe here and get some ink in it and continue filling it up. So we'll go ahead and top it off now. All right. Squeeze that in there. So then, just like this, we're going to take the plug from the vent hole and just simply move it to the fill hole position. We're going to leave that vented, and then you're ready to go ahead and put it in the printer when it calls for it. So we still got the initializing the printer with the initialization cartridges now. But after we install the Chipless firmware, we'll go ahead and put these cartridges in there with a simple cartridge change. So I'll go ahead and fill the rest of these up and get them ready to stand by so we can put them in the printer when it calls for it. Once the initialization is complete, the printer is going to want to run an adjustment. You can opt to do this later, but we're going to go ahead and knock it out now. First, the printer is going to perform a nozzle check, so we'll load up some regular copy paper for these alignment tests. We'll run the nozzle check, and that's good, so we'll go ahead and select the circle to continue with the alignment. We'll select adjust and print the vertical alignment sheet. Select the boxes with the least visible lines and enter them on the printer. We'll select proceed and print out the horizontal alignment sheet. The printer will ask you to choose the rectangles that are not separated or overlapped. And after you make your selection, you press OK to continue. So then we'll set up our paper size and type. In my case, I'm using a sub 120G, the 8.5 by 14. So for the size, I'm going to select legal. And it'll give you a message letting you know that the paper won't fit and not to force it. We'll select premium matte for the paper type. And we're going to skip the fax wizard. Next, we'll set up the Wi-Fi on the printer. We'll go ahead and select the Wi-Fi icon on the top row here. Select Wi-Fi. Start the setup. And select Wi-Fi wizard. Once it finds your network, enter your Wi-Fi password and select OK. It'll let you know that a firmware update is available. Just hit OK for now, and we'll go back and turn the firmware reminder notification off later. I'm going to hit no to this registration reminder, and now the Wi-Fi setup is complete, so we'll select OK. Next, we'll go ahead and turn off the firmware update notification. On the printer's home screen, you're going to go to Settings. Then you're going to scroll down to Firmware Update. You're going to select Notification, and then you're going to select Off. Now the printer won't alert you to firmware update, so you won't be tempted to update the firmware. So now that we have the printer set up, we're going to get on the computer and set up the driver. So next we'll go ahead and complete the next part of the setup, which is downloading and installing the printer driver. And we're going to do that directly from the Epson.com website. And you can use the disk that came with the printer, but this is a lot faster. What you want to do is go to your search bar here, and you're going to type in your product. In our case, it's the 2860. And this will auto-populate over here. You're going to click on the support link. And depending on the operating system, it should populate here. And you're going to go down to your drivers menu and select the printer driver and click download. I'm going to download this to my desktop here. So once that finished downloading, you're going to right click and open it. You'll get this user account control pop-up come up. You're just going to click on yes through this, and it'll start extracting. Now, I'm not going to use this as my default printer, and you don't want to automatically update the software because we're going to be installing Chipless firmware later. So you don't want it to override the firmware. So go ahead and click OK. We'll OK and agree here. Click OK. Now we set up the Wi-Fi earlier, so it's going to make this pretty quick. You click OK here. At this point, it's going to go through, find the printer on your network. We're going to click OK here, and then it's going to finish installing the printer driver. Now I'll also go over the color setup for the printer as well. I'll go ahead and knock that out real quick too. So this is done with the printer driver setup, so we can click OK here. And now we want to go through and set up our color and our printing presets. So we'll click on the search menu. You can click on printers, and this is all in Windows 10, by the way. If you have a Mac, I don't know. I don't use Macs. But anyways, click on printers and scanners. You'll see the printer that we just installed, which is the 2860. We'll click on that. We'll click manage, and we'll click on the printer preferences. Now this is what well, let me go ahead and get this out of here. This is the residual. Let me reset defaults here. Oh. Okay. So this is what it'll default look like when you open up your printing preferences. What we're going to do is add a printing preset, which is going to have all of our information for color and for the type of paper that we're going to, the type of sublimation paper that we're going to be using. So in my case, I'm going to be using A-Sub-120G, the legal size. So we'll go over here to document size. We're going to change that to legal. We're going to print in landscape. Well, I print in landscape. Paper type is going to be premium presentation matte. Quality is going to be high. This is going to be a color profile that we're going to be using. You can do it for black and white too. Like if you have just a black and white print, you can just click this as grayscale, and and it's the same steps. We're going to do a color profile here. So we'll click on color. And then we're going to click on this more options tab. In the more options tab, we're going to uncheck this high speed, and we're going to check mirror image because we're going to be printing with Sublimation Ink. Here we're going to click on, in this color correction section here, we're going to click on custom, and then we're going to click on advanced. And then this radio button here, the color controls, we're going to click on it. That's going to bring this menu up. Now, some people use Adobe RGB. I like to use Epson Vivid with these settings that I'm going to show you here in a second. So go to your color adjustment method. You're going to click on slide bar. We're going to click on 2 for cyan, -20 for magenta, and -15 for yellow. And this will get me in the ballpark of the colors that are closest to the monitor for me. Some people like I said, some people like to use different color modes and color profiles. I found this one gets it more closer to the screen that I'm looking at. So the finished product, the screen, all matched together when it's finished pressing. So if the print comes out a little bit light, or if the finished product comes out a little bit light, we can mess with the brightness here. Same with the contrast and the saturation. If it's coming out a little faded or so, you can bump the saturation up a little bit here. Each printer is set different from the manufacturer, even if it's the same model. I go over this in another video, but each one of these printers, you need to tune them in as best as you can. I can't stress that enough. But anyway, we'll go ahead and click this here, keep this here as a baseline, and we'll click OK. From there, I also like to go to the maintenance tab. We'll click on the extended settings here, and I like to disable the status monitor 3 here, and we can just click OK. And then we'll go back to the more options tab, and now all of our settings are saved right now. And we go to the add remove presets, and we're going to give this preset a name. In this case, we're going to be using A-Sub-120. It's legal size, and it's the Epson Vivid color mode. So, and down here in the comments, I'm going to type in the color settings. So if I ever need to go back and change them, I'll have I'll have a key of what I already set the printer at. So we'll go ahead and put all those in. We'll click a icon up here, do the red Kool-Aid, click on save, and now all of these settings that we changed it to will be saved into this profile here once we click on save. Oh, we already saved it. Once we click on save though, so now all those settings are saved over here into this profile. So anytime that I want to print with sublimation with the 120 paper that I use, I just click on this out of my Photoshop, and it'll change all the settings to what I have to how I like them, and then print it out. And I'll show y'all that a little bit later too. So now we're all set up with the printer and the driver and the printing profile. So now it's time to go ahead and print. Now, in order to print with the refill cartridges on this printer, you have to install Chipless Firmware. Once the Chipless Firmware is installed, it'll allow us to use the no-chip cartridges that we filled with Sublimation Ink earlier. Now, there's a few places you can find Chipless Firmware, but the easiest way is to get it from inkchip.net. The way they have it set up is really easy to follow, and they have videos on how to install the firmware of not only this printer, but for a whole bunch of models. Now, the firmware does cost money, but it's well worth it, even for models with auto reset chips like the 7710 and the 7720, because it'll eliminate those cartridge errors. Okay, so before we get started, what I want to do is go to my desktop. I'm going to right click on the desktop and select new folder. And what we're going to do is create a folder that we're going to store all of our chipless firmware files in, including the activation key, just in case if we ever were to update the firmware or anything like that, we have all of our files in one place. So what we're going to name this is, let's see, 2860 chipless files. All right, so we'll create that there on the desktop, and then we're going to go to inkchip.net. I'm already here. Once you're on inkchip.net, we're going to go to soft, and basically it's the list of all the printers that supported by Chipless Firmware. I have a rule: don't ever buy a cartridge-based printer if it doesn't have Chipless Firmware support. In this case, the 2860 does. So we can go to the 2860 here, and we're going to download two files. We're going to download the firmware file, and we're going to download the activation file. Once we find out if we can update our firmware on our printer, which we should be able to, then we'll go ahead and download. Then we'll go ahead and purchase the key. But for now, we're just going to download the firmware file. And we're going to download it to that Chipless Files folder that we made. And then we're going to download the activation as well. And we're going to download that to that Chipless Files folder that we had made as well. So we'll wait for that to finish downloading. Okay, it looks like it's finished downloading here. So we'll go back to the desktop, and we'll go back to that file folder that we created. And as you can see, here's the two files that we have. Okay, so the printer can only accept the Chipless firmware update via the USB cable. So let's go ahead and plug that in now. Once we got that plugged in, we're going to go back to this Chipless files folder, and we're going to right click on this firmware file, and we're going to extract it. Now I use pzip, but you can use any kind of archiving software like 7-zip or WinZip or WinRAR or anything of that nature. So we'll go ahead and extract it. All right, we'll click OK. We're going to extract it here. So we'll see another folder within our Chipless files folder with the firmware in it. And we're just going to go ahead and run this firmware. We're going to go ahead and click yes on the user access control or user account control window. And it'll go ahead and launch the firmware update. So we'll click on next, click on agree here, click next. Click next again. And then you'll see new version here with the USB connection type. We don't want to do the one with the network. We can't do it over the network. So we'll go ahead and uncheck that. Highlight this USB version here. And then we'll click on Start. It's going to ask us to proceed with the firmware update. I'm going to click Yes. Now, the way I'm doing it is through normal mode. It tells you to do it through update mode by doing a button sequence on the printer, on the video. But mine is set up a little bit different. I was informed that if you have any kind of issues with doing it this way, to give them a call or try it in update mode via the video. But I'll go ahead and put the technical support contact information in the description as well, so you can contact them if you have any problems installing the firmware version of the Chipless firmware. So this, what's happening now off screen is the printer is going through some updates here, and it's going to update the firmware, and it's going to restart. And once it restarts, it's going to hang at about 85%, and then down here it's going to say something like firmware version confirmed. So we're just going to wait for it to finish rebooting here. It's almost done, so it shouldn't be too much longer. Okay, so the printer just restarted, and you can see that it jumped up to 85%, and it says firmware version confirmed. Now you can wait the extra 10 minutes, 15 minutes it's going to take for this to complete. But what I do is I just go down here to the taskbar, I right click on it, click on the task manager, and then we're just going to highlight the Epson firmware updater. We'll right click, and then we'll just hit end task. And what that'll do is close that the firmware updater down, and the Chipless firmware is installed now, but it's not active yet, so we still have to activate it. So we're going to go back to our Chipless files folder. Where we at? So we'll go back here to our Chipless files folder, and this time we're going to run the activation. So we'll go ahead and double click on it. Now what's going to come up is this Windows protected your PC window. Don't click here on don't run, just click on more info, this little link here, and then we're going to click on run anyway. And when it clicks on run anyway, the activation program will pop up, and it'll start to update. And once it's done updating, it's going to ask you to close out and rerun it. So you're going to hit OK, and it's going to close out. Then we'll go back to the activation program and rerun it. And it's going to say that the current version is the latest. And then we can verify that we can update this printer because we can see it here under USB drop down menu. So once we can verify that we can update it, we're going to go ahead and purchase the activation key. So we're going to go back to inkchip.net, and then we're going to head over to buy, the buy button here at the top. And once you're on this price page, you're going to scroll down to where it says Epson Workforce Series, and then we're going to search for our model. Our model is the 2860. So we go here, and then it's going to update the price here, and we're going to add to cart. And once you add to cart, it's going to be up here. Now, once it's added to the cart, before you check out, you can go here to the supply coupon code and type in Gorilla and hit apply coupon. and you'll save 10% on your order. So it doesn't matter if you're updating or buying chipless firmware for the 2860 or the any other model, 77, 20, 77, 10, 36, 40, some of the XP series, XP 440, I have that one. I have the C5210. There's all kinds of support for a lot of printers for chipless firmware. But you type in Gorilla and you can get 10% off of either one of them. So once you proceed with the checkout, you'll get a activation code in the mail. And once you get that activation code, you're going to go back to your activation program and you're going to hit Activate Online. And once you hit Activate Online, this window will pop up. We'll go ahead and insert our key. All right. And then we'll also, before we hit OK, we'll also go back to our chipless files folder and we're going to create a text document. So we'll go ahead, New, Text Document, and this is going to be activation key. So we'll double click that and then we're going to paste our activation key at the top, or activation code at the top. And then we'll save it. We're just going to minimize it for now. We'll go back to our activation. We'll click OK. And then it's going to go ahead and write the activation code to the printer. So now the printer is chipless, and it's permanently chipless. You don't have to ever deal with the cartridge issues again. But before it's written permanently, we have to power cycle the printer. So we'll go ahead and turn it off by just pressing the power button. All right, now that's turning off right now. And while it's doing that, or while it's turning off, oh, it's already off. So we'll go ahead and turn it back on. And while it's turning back on, what we'll do is OK out of this, and we're going to copy this activation code. And what this will do is, in the event that that firmware gets updated, we can use this code to recover our chipless firmware. So we'll go ahead and save this, and we can close this out. Actually, let's minimize this and I'll show you how that works. So let's say we accidentally update our firmware and we lose our chipless firmware capabilities, or the ability to read the third-party cartridges. So what we do is we go here to this activation, and say you don't have your activation code anymore. All you have to do is click on, I think it's activate. Let's see. No, you just type in, you just paste your activation code, and then you click on activate, and it'll write it, and then you can do the same steps, turn it off, turn it back on, and you'll have your chipless firmware installed again. So we'll go ahead and do that and turn it back on here in a second. We'll be good to go. So that's how you recover your key if you were to lose your ability to read the third-party cartridges, like if you update your firmware. Okay, so now that we got our chipless firmware installed, we need to go ahead and put in our refillable cartridges. So what we want to do is go to the ink page, the ink status page, or the supply status page, and then we're going to replace the ink cartridges. And click on next. And we'll start, and it's going to unlock the carriage here. And once it's unlocked and moved into this position, it's going to ask you to open a scanner unit and replace the ink cartridge. So we're just going to take all of these out. And and we're going to replace them with the refillable ink cartridges. So remember that we don't want to have these vent holes plugged up. Now it's not going to show anything on the display here because it doesn't have any chips in there to register on the touch screen, but it's a chipless firmware. So once we hit complete it, it's going to move into place. And then it's going to tell you that it's initializing. Once it gets done initializing, the ink change process will be completed. Now, just to be on the safe side, I print at least half of a purge file just to make sure the sublimation ink is fully flowing into the print head. So now we have sublimation ink installed in the printer. We can go ahead and start printing. Here's a license plate that I made. Now, license plates are a really good money maker. They're all the same size, so you don't have to buy a bunch of different sizes like t-shirts. And the price per unit is pretty cheap, so you can turn a profit pretty easily. After the print is complete, we'll let it dry for a couple of minutes, and we'll take the blank license plate onto the print. We'll press it with the paper side down at 390 to 395 degrees for approximately 60 seconds on medium pressure. I'll let it cool down for a minute, remove the paper, and disco. Here's what the finished product will look like. So that's how you set up and use the WF-2860 for sublimation printing. Now remember, you're going to have to use a chipless firmware on this printer. Again, I'll put links in the description. I'm going to be adding assist to both of these so we can print with a little bit more ink and not have to refill them so often. So come back for that when it comes up. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Go ahead and subscribe so you can be alerted when the next video comes out. Until then, good luck and good night.